Sarah was just trying to catch the elevator when she stumbled backward into a stranger's chest. In the darkness of the power outage, she turned around and pressed her lips against what she thought was her boyfriend's mouth. But when the lights flickered back on, she found herself staring into the cold gray eyes of Alexander Kane, the ruthless CEO who just fired half her department. His face showed no emotion, but his hands were still gripping her waist. What she did next shocked everyone. Before we begin, write in the comments what city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy watching. The mistake that changed everything. The rain hammered against the glass windows of Kane Industries Tower as Sarah Chen rushed through the marble lobby, her heels clicking frantically against the polished floor. She clutched her purse and a small gift box, checking her phone for the third time in 10 seconds. Come on, she whispered, jabbing the elevator button repeatedly. Marcus had been so mysterious about this dinner, insisting it was a surprise she'd never forget. After 2 years together, maybe he was finally ready to take the next step. The elevator dinged and she stepped inside, pressing the button for the parking garage. Just as the doors began to close, she heard running footsteps.
Hold the elevator.
Sarah pressed the door button, and a tall figure slipped inside just as the lights flickered. The elevator lurched slightly and everything went dark. Perfect, the stranger muttered in a deep voice that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Blackout, Sarah said, trying to sound casual. Happens all the time in these old buildings. She could hear him breathing in the darkness, could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something else. Coffee, maybe, and the faint scent of rain. The elevator was small, and she could feel his presence behind her, warm and solid. Which floor? He asked.
Parking garage.
You. Same. The elevator shuddered and began moving again, but the lights stayed off. Sarah felt herself losing her balance as the car swayed slightly. She stepped backward to steady herself and collided with a firm chest. Strong hands caught her waist to keep her from falling. Sorry, she gasped, turning around in the darkness. In that moment, thinking of Marcus waiting for her, thinking of the surprise dinner and the possibility of forever, Sarah rose up on her toes and pressed her lips against the stranger's mouth.
The kiss lasted only seconds, soft and warm and utterly perfect.
She felt his sharp intake of breath, felt his hands tighten on her waist, felt something electric pass between them that she'd never experienced before. Then the lights flickered back on. Sarah found herself staring into the coldest gray eyes she'd ever seen.
Alexander Kane.
The CEO who had fired half her department just last month. The man who had personally destroyed her friend's career without blinking an eye. The ruthless billionaire who treated employees like numbers on a spreadsheet. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the rain, his suit expensive and unwrinkled. His jaw was sharp, his mouth, the mouth she had just kissed, was set in a hard line. But his hands were still on her waist, and she could see something flickering in his eyes. Something that looked almost vulnerable. Oh God, Sarah whispered, stumbling backward until she hit the elevator wall.
Oh God, I'm so sorry.
I thought you were... I didn't know.
Alexander Kane said nothing.
He just stared at her with those penetrating gray eyes, his expression unreadable. But Sarah caught something else, something that made her heart skip. For just a moment, his mask had slipped, and she'd seen something raw and hungry and desperate. The elevator dinged and the doors opened to reveal the parking garage. Sarah grabbed her purse and ran, leaving the gift box behind in her panic. She could feel his eyes on her back as she fumbled for her car keys, could feel the weight of his stare as she finally got her door open. She sat in her car for a full minute, hands shaking on the steering wheel. She had just kissed Alexander Kane.
The Alexander Kane.
The man who could destroy her career with a single phone call. The man who probably didn't even know her name. But the way he had looked at her in that moment when the lights came on, like she was the only person in the world, like she was something precious he'd been searching for his whole life, that look was burned into her memory forever. Sarah finally started her car and drove toward the restaurant where Marcus was waiting. She tried to push the kiss out of her mind, tried to focus on her boyfriend and their future together. But she couldn't stop thinking about those gray eyes, couldn't stop feeling the phantom touch of Alexander Kane's hands on her waist. By the time she reached the restaurant, she had almost convinced herself it was just a mistake.
A simple case of wrong place, wrong time.
It didn't mean anything. It couldn't mean anything. She was so wrong.
The consequences of one kiss.
The restaurant was dim and intimate, with candles flickering on every table and soft jazz playing in the background. Sarah spotted Marcus immediately, his blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing the blue shirt she'd bought him for his birthday. But he wasn't alone. A beautiful brunette sat across from him, her manicured hand resting on his arm as she laughed at something he'd said. They looked comfortable together. Too comfortable. Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. She stood frozen in the doorway, watching her boyfriend of 2 years with another woman. The hostess appeared beside her.
Table for one. No, Sarah whispered.
I think I'm making a mistake. But Marcus had already seen her. His face went pale, and the brunette turned to follow his gaze. Sarah watched in slow motion as understanding dawned on the other woman's face. Sarah, Marcus called out, standing up quickly. This isn't what it looks like. Really? Sarah walked over slowly, her voice surprisingly steady. Because it looks like you're on a date with someone who isn't your girlfriend. The brunette, Jessica, Sarah remembered now, Marcus's co-worker, had the decency to look uncomfortable. I should go, she murmured, grabbing her purse. No, stay, Sarah said calmly.
I'm the one who's leaving. Sarah, wait.
Marcus grabbed her arm as she turned to go. Let me explain. Explain what? How long you've been seeing her behind my back? Sarah pulled her arm free. 3 months? 6 months? Or has this been going on since the beginning? Marcus's silence was answer enough. The surprise dinner, Sarah said, understanding flooding through her. This was never about us, was it? This was your way of breaking up with me without having to do it yourself. Make me catch you cheating so I'd be the one to end it. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Sarah looked at Jessica, who was trying to disappear into her chair. How does it feel, knowing he'll probably do the same thing to you? She turned and walked out of the restaurant with her head held high, but the tears started falling the moment she reached her car. 2 years. 2 years of her life wasted on someone who couldn't even be honest enough to break up with her properly. Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander Kane sat in his glass-walled boardroom, surrounded by his executives as they discussed quarterly projections. But he wasn't listening. He couldn't concentrate on anything except the memory of soft lips against his, the sweet scent of vanilla perfume, and wide brown eyes staring up at him in shock. Mr. Kane. His CFO's voice cut through his thoughts.
The Henderson account.
Alexander blinked, refocusing on the room. Handle it, he said curtly. Whatever they want, give it to them. His executives exchanged glances.
Alexander Kane never gave clients whatever they wanted. He negotiated, he demanded, he conquered.
He didn't give anything away for free. Sir, they're asking for a 30% discount. I said handle it. Alexander's voice was ice-cold, but inside, he felt anything but cold. He felt like he was burning from the inside out, like every nerve ending in his body had been set on fire by a single innocent kiss. The meeting ended, and Alexander remained seated as his executives filed out. His assistant, Margaret, poked her head through the door. Your 7 o'clock cancelled, she said. Should I reschedule?
No. Go home, Margaret. Take the weekend.
Margaret looked surprised but didn't argue. She'd worked for Alexander Kane for 5 years, and she knew better than to question his rare moments of generosity. Alone in his office, Alexander stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened with water. He pressed his palm against the cool glass and closed his eyes. He could still feel her in his arms, could still taste the sweetness of her lips, could still see the way her eyes had widened when she realized who he was. She'd looked terrified, but underneath the fear, he'd seen something else. Something that matched the fire burning in his own chest. Alexander Kane had kissed hundreds of women in his 32 years. Models, actresses, socialites, all of them beautiful, all of them temporary. But none of them had ever made him feel like he was drowning and flying at the same time. None of them had ever made him want to throw away everything he'd built just to kiss them again. He didn't even know her name. The next morning, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at her phone. She'd called in sick to work, something she never did, but she couldn't face going back to Kane Industries. Not after what had happened. Not when she might run into him. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Lisa. "How did the dinner go?"
Did Marcus finally propose?
Sarah stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "It's over." Her phone immediately started ringing, but Sarah ignored it. She didn't want to explain about Marcus, didn't want to talk about the kiss, didn't want to think about gray eyes and strong hands and the way her heart had stopped beating for one perfect moment. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. At exactly 9:30, her phone rang again. This time it was work. "Sarah, this is Janet from HR. I need you to come in today. There's been a situation." Sarah's blood turned to ice.
What kind of situation?
"Just come in as soon as you can. And Sarah, come directly to my office."
Don't stop at your desk.
The line went dead, and Sarah stared at her phone in horror. He knew. Somehow, Alexander Kane had figured out who she was, and now she was going to be fired. Just like everyone else who had ever crossed him. She dressed carefully in her best suit, as if professional clothing could somehow protect her from what was coming. The ride to Kane Industries felt like a funeral march, and by the time she reached Janet's office, her hands were shaking.
Sarah, sit down.
Janet looked uncomfortable, which was never a good sign. "There's been an unusual request from the executive floor." "I can explain." "You're being transferred," Janet interrupted. "Effective immediately. You're going to be working as executive assistant to Mr. Kane himself." Sarah stared at her. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's a promotion. Significant salary increase, full benefits, your own office. Mr. Kane specifically requested you by name." "But I don't understand. I've never even worked with him before. I don't think he even knows who I am." Janet's expression was puzzled. "He knows exactly who you are, Sarah. He asked for you specifically. Said you were exactly what he was looking for in an assistant." Sarah felt like the world was spinning around her. This made no sense. None of this made any sense.
When do uno start?
Now. He's waiting for you in his office.
Sarah rode the elevator to the top floor in Adase.
The executive level was all glass and steel, intimidating and cold. Alexander Kane's assistant, his former assistant, apparently, showed her to a sleek office right outside the CEO's door. "He wants to see you immediately," the woman said, packing up her desk. "Good luck. You're going to need it." Sarah knocked on Alexander's door, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it from inside. His deep voice called for her to enter, and she stepped into the most impressive office she'd ever seen. Alexander Kane stood with his back to her, looking out at the city through his massive windows. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly, and his dark hair caught the morning sunlight. He didn't turn around when she entered. "Close the door," he said quietly. Sarah did as he asked, her hands trembling slightly. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension and unspoken questions. Finally, Alexander turned around, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. In the harsh fluorescent light of the elevator, he had been handsome. In the natural light of his office, he was devastating. His gray eyes met hers, and she felt that same electric shock she'd experienced in the elevator. "Miss Chen," he said, and she was surprised he knew her name. "I believe we need to talk."
Working for the enemy. You know my name, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper.
Alexander moved around his desk with predatory grace, each step deliberate and controlled.
I make it my business to know everyone who works for me.
Especially those who make memorable first impressions. Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. "Mr. Kane, about yesterday, I want to apologize." "Sit down," he interrupted, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. His tone was businesslike, but Sarah caught the slight roughness in his voice when he spoke. She sat, smoothing her skirt nervously. Alexander remained standing, towering over her in a way that made her feel small and exposed. His gray eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "Tell me about your qualifications," he said.
Sarah blinked. "My qualifications?"
"For the position. You have a business degree from Columbia, graduated magna cum laude. 3 years experience in project management. fluent in Mandarin and Spanish.
Exemplary performance reviews.
He recited her resume from memory, never breaking eye contact. But what I want to know is why someone with your credentials was stuck in a junior analyst position. The question caught her off guard. The position was what was available when I was hired. And you never asked for a promotion? Never demanded to be recognized for your worth? Sarah felt a flare of defensiveness. Some of us can't just demand whatever we want and expect to get it. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, amusement, maybe, or approval. No, I suppose they can't. But you can now. I don't understand. As my assistant, you'll have access to every meeting, every decision, every deal that crosses my desk. You'll travel with me, represent me, speak for me when necessary. It's a position that requires absolute trust and complete discretion. He paused, his gaze intensifying.
Can uno trust you, Miss Chen?
The question felt loaded with meaning beyond the professional. Sarah met his stare steadily. Yes. Good.
We start now.
The next 6 hours were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and strategic decisions that made Sarah's head spin. Alexander moved through his business like a master chess player, always 3 moves ahead of everyone else. He was brilliant, ruthless, and completely in control of every situation. He was also the most demanding boss Sarah had ever encountered. The Morrison report needs to be rewritten, he said, barely glancing at the document she'd spent an hour perfecting. The financial projections are too conservative. They need to see confidence, not caution. But the numbers are accurate. I don't pay you to be accurate, Miss Chen. I pay you to be right. His gray eyes met hers across the desk. There's a difference. By noon, Sarah understood why his previous assistants never lasted more than a few months. Alexander Kane expected perfection, and he expected it immediately. He worked through lunch, stayed late into the evening, and demanded the same dedication from everyone around him. But Sarah also began to see something else. In the board meeting where he decimated a competitor's proposal, she noticed how he protected his own employees, deflecting criticism and taking responsibility for their mistakes. When a junior executive stumbled through a presentation, Alexander didn't humiliate him. He asked pointed questions that helped the young man find his footing. "You're not what I expected," Sarah said as they worked late into the evening, the office empty except for the 2 of them. Alexander looked up from the contract he was reviewing. "What did you expect?" "A monster," Sarah said honestly. "That's what everyone says about you. That you're cold, heartless, that you destroy people for fun." "And what do you think now?" Sarah considered her words carefully. "I think you're hard because you have to be. I think you make difficult decisions so other people don't have to. But I also think—" She trailed off, suddenly aware of how intimate the moment felt. "What?" "I think you're lonelier than you let anyone see." The words hung between them like a challenge. Alexander's expression didn't change, but Sarah saw something shift in his eyes, a flash of vulnerability quickly hidden behind his usual mask of control. "It's late," he said finally.
You should go home. What about you?
"I have work to finish." Sarah gathered her things slowly, reluctant to leave him alone in the empty office. At the door, she turned back. "Mr. Kane." "Yes." "Thank you."
For the opportunity.
"I know you didn't have to." "No," he said quietly. "I didn't have to." Their eyes met and held, and Sarah felt that familiar electric current running between them. For a moment, neither of them moved, neither of them breathed. Then Alexander looked away, breaking the spell.
Good night, Miss Chen.
"Good night."
Sarah rode the elevator down to the parking garage, her mind racing.
She was playing a dangerous game, working so closely with Alexander Kane. Every moment in his presence was like standing too close to a fire, thrilling and terrifying and potentially destructive. But as she drove home through the city streets, she couldn't stop thinking about that moment of vulnerability she'd glimpsed behind his carefully constructed walls. There was more to Alexander Kane than the ruthless CEO the world saw. There was pain there, and loneliness, and something else that called to something deep inside her own heart. The next morning brought a crisis that tested everything Sarah had learned about her new boss. Marcus showed up at the office, furious and demanding to see her. "You can't hide behind him forever," Marcus said when security tried to escort him out. "I know what kind of man Alexander Kane really is, and when I'm done, everyone else will know too." Sarah watched from Alexander's office as Marcus made a scene in the lobby, shouting about corruption and insider trading and abuse of power. None of it was true, but that didn't matter. Reputation was everything in their world, and Marcus knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. "Handle it," Alexander said calmly, never looking up from his computer. "How? You know him better than I do. What does he want?" Sarah thought about Marcus, about his pride and his ambition and his desperate need to always be the smartest person in the room.
He wants to hurt me.
And he wants to use you to do it. Then we give him what he wants. Sarah stared at him. "You're going to let him hurt me?" "No," Alexander said, finally looking up. His gray eyes were cold as winter steel. "I'm going to let him think he can hurt you. There's a difference. I don't understand. Trust me." 2 simple words, but they changed everything. Sarah realized in that moment that she did trust him. Completely. Irrationally. Despite every warning, her rational mind was screaming. "What do you need me to do?" Alexander smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, it wasn't cold or calculating. It was warm and real and devastating in its beauty.
"Just be yourself, Miss Chen."
"That's all I've ever needed."
Walls begin to crack.
The Pinnacle restaurant occupied the top floor of the Metropolitan Tower, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city lights below. Sarah had never been anywhere so elegant, where the waiters moved like dancers and each table setting cost more than her monthly rent. "Remember," Alexander murmured as they were led to their table, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. "We've been dating for 3 months. You're shy about public displays of affection, which explains why we've kept things private." Sarah nodded, acutely aware of his touch burning through the silk of her borrowed dress. Alexander had sent the dress to her apartment that afternoon, a stunning black cocktail dress that fit her perfectly and probably cost more than her car. "How did you know my size?" she'd asked when he called to make sure it arrived. "Lucky guess," he'd said, but something in his voice suggested it wasn't luck at all. Now, sitting across from him at the intimate table, Sarah tried to remember that this was all pretend. Alexander needed a girlfriend for this dinner with potential investors, and she was playing a role.
Nothing more.
But when he reached across the table and took her hand in his, when his thumb traced gentle circles across her knuckles, it felt devastatingly real. "James Patterson," Alexander said as an older man approached their table. "Good to see you again."
"Alexander."
The man clapped him on the shoulder with the easy familiarity of old money and older connections. "And this must be the mysterious Sarah we've heard so much about." Sarah smiled and shook hands, falling easily into the role of the smitten girlfriend. It wasn't difficult to pretend. Alexander was magnetic in social situations, charming and confident without being arrogant. She could see why people were drawn to him, why they wanted to do business with him. But she also saw the other side of him as the evening progressed. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes when dealing with competitors. The subtle threats wrapped in polite conversation.
The ruthless calculation behind every laugh and every handshake.
"You're very quiet tonight," Alexander observed when they stepped out onto the restaurant's private balcony for some air. The city sparkled below them, and the night breeze carried the faint scent of rain. "I'm watching you work," Sarah said. "It's fascinating. Terrifying, but fascinating. Terrifying. The way you can make someone feel like the most important person in the world one moment and completely destroy them the next." She turned to face him, studying his profile in the dim light. "Do you even remember what it feels like to be genuine with someone?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his hands braced against the balcony railing. "I was 12 when my father left," he said finally. "Came home from school one day and he was just gone. No goodbye, no explanation. Just a note saying he'd found someone who made him happy." Sarah's heart clenched at the pain in his voice.
"Alexander."
"My mother fell apart," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Completely fell apart. Wouldn't get out of bed for weeks. The company my grandfather built was hemorrhaging money, and there was no one left to save it. No one except a 12-year-old boy who learned very quickly that showing weakness meant losing everything." "That's not weakness," Sarah said softly. That's being human. In my world, they're the same thing. He turned to face her, and in the moonlight, his gray eyes looked almost silver. I rebuilt everything my father destroyed. Made the company stronger, more profitable than it had ever been. But the cost. He trailed off, his jaw tightening. What cost? I became exactly what everyone expected me to be. Cold. Ruthless.
Untouchable.
His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Sometimes I wonder if there's anything left of the person I used to be. Sarah stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. There is, she said with certainty. I've seen glimpses of him. In the way you protect your employees, in the charity work you try to keep secret, in the way you look when you think no one is watching. And what do I look like when I think no one is watching?
Lonely, Sarah whispered.
So incredibly lonely. The air between them crackled with tension. Alexander's eyes dropped to her lips, and Sarah felt her breath catch. He was going to kiss her.
Here, under the stars, with the city spread out below them like a glittering promise.
But at the last moment, he stepped back. We should go back inside, he said, his voice rough with something that sounded like regret. They'll be expecting us. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced smiles and polite conversation. Sarah played her part perfectly, the devoted girlfriend hanging on every word her successful boyfriend said. But inside, she was reeling from what had almost happened on the balcony. The car ride back to her apartment was silent, tension thick between them like a living thing. When the driver pulled up to her building, Alexander got out to walk her to the door. Thank you, he said formally.
For tonight. You were perfect.
It was just pretend, Sarah said, though the words tasted like lies. Was it? The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Sarah looked up into his eyes and saw her own confusion reflected there. This was her boss. Her impossibly complicated, emotionally unavailable, devastatingly attractive boss who could destroy her career with a single word. Yes, she whispered, though every cell in her body screamed otherwise. It was just pretend.
Alexander nodded slowly. Good night, Sarah.
It was the first time he'd used her first name, and the sound of it on his lips sent shivers down her spine. She watched him get back into the car and drive away, leaving her standing alone on the sidewalk with her heart pounding and her carefully constructed walls crumbling around her. Back in his penthouse apartment, Alexander poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city he'd conquered. But tonight, victory felt hollow. Tonight, he couldn't stop thinking about brown eyes and gentle hands and the way Sarah had looked at him when she called him lonely. She was right, of course. He was lonely. Had been for so long that he'd almost forgotten what connection felt like. But being with Sarah tonight, even pretending to be something they weren't, had reminded him of what he'd been missing. It was dangerous. She was dangerous. In just 3 days, she'd managed to crack the walls he'd spent 20 years building. If he let her get any closer, she could destroy him completely. But as he finished his drink and headed to bed, Alexander couldn't bring himself to care. For the first time in years, he was feeling something other than the cold emptiness that had become his constant companion. And that terrified him more than any business rival ever could. The competition that changes everything. Sarah arrived at the office early Monday morning to find Alexander already at his desk, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee cups. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept at all. "How long have you been here?" she asked, setting a fresh cup of coffee on his desk. "Since 3, he said without looking up. "We have a problem." Sarah sat down across from him, instantly alert. "What kind of problem?" "Henderson Industries is pulling their contract. $20 million, gone overnight." Alexander finally looked up, and Sarah could see the fury simmering behind his controlled expression. "Someone leaked the details of our proposal to Blackstone Corporation. They undercut us by exactly 2%. Sarah felt her blood run cold. Henderson Industries was their biggest client, and losing them would mean laying off dozens of employees. Who would have access to that information? Anyone in the senior management team. Anyone in accounting. Anyone in...
Alexander's eyes narrowed.
Anyone who might have a personal vendetta against me. The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind like a puzzle she'd been unconsciously solving.
Marcus.
Your ex-boyfriend works for Blackstone now, doesn't he? Sarah nodded, her stomach churning. He got hired there 2 weeks ago. I thought it was strange. He's not usually the type they go for. She paused, understanding dawning. He's using me to get to you. The question is, how much does he know about our operations? And what else is he planning? Before Sarah could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Coffee? We need to talk about your new job. She showed the message to Alexander, whose expression darkened further. Meet him, Alexander said. Find out what he knows. And then what? Then we destroy him. The coffee shop was busy with the morning rush, giving Sarah plenty of cover as she waited for Marcus to arrive. When he finally showed up, 15 minutes late as always, he looked pleased with himself in a way that made her skin crawl. Sarah! He kissed her cheek like they were still together, ignoring the way she flinched away from his touch.
You look amazing.
Working for Alexander Kane must agree with you.
What do you want, Marcus?
Straight to the point. I always liked that about you. He ordered an expensive latte and gestured for her to sit. I hear Kane's having some trouble with his clients lately.
I wouldn't know. Come on, Sarah.
You're his personal assistant. You know everything that goes on in that office. Marcus leaned forward, his expression turning serious. I'm trying to help you here. Kane is going down, and when he does, everyone around him gets buried too. Unless they're smart enough to get out first. Get out and do what?
Come work for you.
For us. Blackstone is expanding, and they could use someone with your skills. Someone who understands how Kane operates from the inside. Sarah stared at him, finally understanding the full scope of what he was asking. You want me to spy on him?
I want you to protect yourself.
Kane is a sinking ship, Sarah. The only question is whether you go down with him or swim to safety.
And if he refuse?
Marcus's smile turned cold. Then I guess everyone will find out about your little incident in the elevator. Amazing how these stories spread, isn't it? Ambitious assistant seduces her boss to get ahead. Very disappointing, but not entirely surprising. You wouldn't. Try me. Sarah felt trapped, caught between Marcus's threats and her growing loyalty to Alexander.
I need time to think.
You have 24 hours. After that, things get unpleasant for both of you.
Sarah left the coffee shop feeling sick.
She'd underestimated Marcus, underestimated his capacity for cruelty. He wasn't just trying to hurt Alexander's business. He was trying to hurt her too, using their history as a weapon. Back at the office, she found Alexander in the conference room with his legal team, strategizing their response to Henderson's defection. He looked up when she entered, reading the distress on her face immediately. Conference room, 5 minutes, he said to his lawyers.
I need a moment alone.
When they were gone, Alexander moved to stand in front of her, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. What did he want? Sarah told him everything, watching his expression grow colder with every word. When she finished, he was completely still, like a predator preparing to strike. He threatened you, Alexander said quietly. He threatened both of us.
No.
He threatened you.
Alexander's voice was deadly calm.
That's different. Alexander, what are you going to do? Instead of answering, he pulled out his phone and made a call.
David.
I need everything you can find on Marcus Chen. Employment history, financial records, personal relationships.
Everything.
He paused, listening. No, I need it today. You can't just destroy him, Sarah said when he hung up. Watch me. This isn't just about business anymore, is it? Sarah studied his face, seeing something fierce and protective in his gray eyes.
This is personal for you now.
He hurt you, Alexander said simply. He used you, betrayed you, and now he's threatening you. Yes, it's personal. The intensity of his response took Sarah's breath away. She'd never had anyone defend her like this, never had someone willing to go to war on her behalf. It was thrilling and terrifying and completely overwhelming. Why? she whispered. Alexander stepped closer, so close she could see the flecks of silver in his eyes.
You really don't know?
No. Because you matter to me, he said roughly. More than you should. More than is safe for either of us. The confession hung between them like a bridge neither of them was ready to cross. Sarah felt her heart racing, felt that familiar electricity sparking in the air between them.
Alexander.
I know.
This is complicated.
You work for me, and I'm not. I'm not good at this. At caring about people. At letting people matter. He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly vulnerable. But I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop wanting to protect you, to take care of you, to what? To keep you safe from people like me. Before Sarah could respond, Alexander's phone rang. He answered it curtly, his expression shifting as he listened. Interesting, he said when he hung up. It seems your ex-boyfriend has been embezzling from his previous 3 employers. Small amounts, nothing that would be noticed immediately, but a clear pattern over 5 years. Sarah stared at him. How did you find that so quickly? I have resources most people don't. Alexander's smile was sharp and predatory. The question is, what do we do with this information? We could report him to the authorities. We could. Or we could use it to neutralize his threat first. Alexander studied her face carefully.
The choice is yours, Sarah.
You know him better than I do. Sarah thought about Marcus, about his ambition and his greed and his complete lack of regard for anyone but himself. He would destroy Alexander without hesitation, would ruin her reputation just to prove a point. He was exactly the kind of person who deserved whatever was coming to him. Do it, she said quietly.
Whatever you're planning, do it.
Alexander nodded, already reaching for his phone. Consider it done. That afternoon, Sarah worked alongside Alexander to prepare a comprehensive response to Blackstone's attempted takeover. They stayed late into the night, ordering takeout and spreading documents across every surface of his office. It felt like being in a war room, strategizing against an enemy who had underestimated their resolve. Try this section, Sarah said, handing him a revised contract proposal. I think if we emphasize the long-term benefits rather than the immediate savings, Henderson might reconsider. Alexander read through her changes, nodding slowly. This is brilliant. How did you know to focus on sustainability metrics? I've been reading Henderson's annual reports. Their new CEO is big on environmental responsibility. She's been pushing for greener business practices across all their partnerships. And you thought to use that as leverage. I thought to give them what they actually want, not what we assume they want. Alexander looked up from the documents, his gray eyes intense.
You're not just smart, Sarah.
You're intuitive. You see connections other people miss. The praise sent warmth flooding through her chest.
I learned from watching you.
The way you read people, anticipate their needs before they even know what they are. Is that what you think I do? Isn't it? Alexander was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the soft light of his desk lamp. With everyone else, maybe. But with you. He trailed off, shaking his head.
With me what?
With you, I don't have to anticipate anything.
You see me. The real me, not the version uno show the world.
His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Sarah felt her breath catch. They were alone in the empty office building, surrounded by the intimate glow of lamplight and the weight of everything unspoken between them. The professional boundaries they'd been so carefully maintaining seemed to dissolve in the charged air. Dangerous for who? She asked softly. For both of us. Alexander stood and moved around the desk, coming to stand directly in front of her chair. Sarah looked up at him, her heart pounding as he reached out to gently touch her face. Sarah, he said, her name sounding like a prayer on his lips. We shouldn't. I know. This could ruin everything. I know.
You could lose your job. I could lose my company.
The board would never. I know, Sarah whispered, reaching up to cover his hand with hers. I know all of that. But I don't care anymore. Something broke in Alexander's expression, like a dam finally giving way to the flood. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, to stop this before it went too far. Instead, Sarah rose from her chair to meet him halfway. This kiss was nothing like the accidental one in the elevator. This was deliberate and desperate and full of weeks of pent-up longing. Alexander's arms came around her, pulling her against him like he was afraid she might disappear. Sarah felt like she was melting, like every nerve ending in her body had caught fire. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "Good," Sarah replied, surprising herself with her certainty.
He wanted to change everything. Forbidden feelings surface.
The next morning brought news that shifted the entire landscape of their war with Blackstone. Alexander's private investigator had worked through the night, uncovering a web of financial improprieties that went far beyond Marcus's embezzlement. "Blackstone's been systematically targeting our clients for 6 months," Alexander explained as they reviewed the evidence in his office. "They've been using insider information to undercut us on every major contract." Sarah studied the financial records spread across his desk. "How is that even possible? They'd need access to our internal systems, our client databases." "They have access. Someone's been feeding them information from inside our company."
The betrayal it sarà like a physical blow.
"Who?" "That's what we need to find out."
Alexander's expression was grim.
"But first, we deal with your ex-boyfriend. He called an hour ago, demanding to know your decision." "What did you tell him?" "That he should come to the office this afternoon if he wants an answer." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine.
Alexander, what are you planning?
Justice. At 3 o'clock, Marcus arrived at Kane Industries looking confident and smug. He dressed carefully for the meeting, expensive suit, perfect hair, the practiced smile of someone who thought he held all the cards. Alexander received him in the main conference room, with Sarah and the company's head of security present as witnesses. Marcus's confidence faltered slightly when he saw the formal setup, but he quickly recovered. "Alexander Kane," Marcus said, extending his hand. "I've heard so much about you." Alexander didn't take the offered hand. "Mr. Chen."
Please, sit down.
Marcus sat, glancing between Alexander and Sarah with growing uncertainty. "I assume Sarah told you about our conversation yesterday." "She did. Very illuminating." Alexander opened a thick folder and slid a photograph across the table. "Do you recognize this?" Marcus looked down at the image, a bank statement showing regular deposits from 3 different companies. His face went pale. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts."
Alexander's voice was deadly calm.
"You've been embezzling from your employers for 5 years. Small amounts at first, then growing bolder as you learned to hide your tracks." "That's ridiculous. 53,000 from Morrison and Associates. 28,000 from Pacific Holdings.
37,000 from Anderson Industries."
Alexander leaned back in his chair, his gray eyes cold as Arctic ice.
"Shudi continue."
Marcus looked trapped, his practiced charm cracking under pressure. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually, I can. Bank records, forged receipts, falsified expense reports, it's all here." Alexander gestured to the thick folder. "Along with your attempts to sell confidential information about my company to Blackstone Corporation." "This is entrapment."
"No, this is business." Alexander stood, towering over Marcus with quiet menace.
"Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Blackstone and resign immediately. You're going to return every penny you stole, plus interest. And you're going to disappear from Sarah's life permanently."
"And if he refuse?"
"Then I turn this evidence over to the FBI, the SEC, and every major business publication in the city. Your career will be over. Your reputation will be destroyed. You'll be lucky to get a job stocking shelves at a convenience store." Marcus looked around the room desperately, his gaze finally settling on Sarah.
"Sarah, please."
"We had something real once. You can't let him do this to me." Sarah stood slowly, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. "What we had was never real, Marcus. Real doesn't involve lying, cheating, and threatening people I care about. People you care about? Marcus's expression turned ugly. You've been sleeping with him, haven't you? The innocent little assistant act is just a cover for. He never got to finish the sentence. Alexander moved faster than Sarah would have thought possible, grabbing Marcus by the throat and slamming him against the conference room wall. Choose your next words very carefully, Alexander said, his voice deadly quiet. Because they might be your last. Marcus struggled briefly, then went still when he saw the absolute sincerity in Alexander's eyes. This wasn't a business negotiation anymore. This was personal, and Marcus had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I'll do it, Marcus gasped. I'll resign.
I'll pay back the money. Just let me go.
Alexander released him, stepping back with visible effort to control himself. You have 48 hours. If I hear so much as a whisper about Sarah or my company from you after that, I will destroy you so completely that you'll wish you'd never been born. Marcus straightened his jacket with shaking hands, all his earlier bravado gone. He looked at Sarah one last time, and she saw something like regret in his eyes. I really did love you once, he said quietly. No, Sarah replied.
You loved the idea of me.
You loved having someone who believed in you, who made you feel important. But you never loved me enough to be honest with me, to respect me, to choose me over your own ambitions. Marcus had no answer for that. He gathered what remained of his dignity and left the conference room, leaving Sarah and Alexander alone with the aftermath of their victory.
Are you all right?
Alexander asked, his voice gentle now that the threat was gone. I think so. Sarah sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. Is it really over? It's over. Alexander sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The tension of the confrontation was fading, replaced by something else, an awareness of how far they'd come, how much they'd risked for each other. Thank you, Sarah said softly. For protecting me.
For believing in me.
Sarah. Alexander turned to face her fully, his gray eyes intense with emotion.
What happened yesterday, in my office? Don't, Sarah interrupted.
Don't tell me it was a mistake. Don't tell me we should forget about it and go back to being professional. We should. You know we should. Why? Because it's complicated? Because it might cause problems. Sarah stood up, sudden anger giving her courage. My whole life has been about playing it safe, about not taking risks, about accepting less than I deserve. I'm tired of it, Alexander.
I'm tired of pretending you don't feel what I feel.
And what do you feel? The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and danger. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change everything between them. I feel like I've been sleepwalking for years, and you woke me up, she said quietly. I feel like every wall I've built around my heart has crumbled since the moment I met you. I feel terrified and exhilarated and more alive than I've ever been in my life. Alexander stood slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. Sarah.
I'm falling in love with you, she whispered.
I know I shouldn't. I know it's dangerous and complicated and probably impossible. But I am, and I can't stop it, and I don't want to stop it.
For a moment, Alexander said nothing.
Then he crossed the distance between them in 2 quick strides, cupping her face in his hands like she was something precious and fragile. I've been falling in love with you since the moment you kissed me in that elevator, he said roughly. Since the moment you looked at me like I was something worth saving instead of something to be feared.
Alexander.
I love your strength, your intelligence, the way you see the best in people even when they don't deserve it.
I love how you challenge me, how you make me want to be better than I am.
His thumbs traced gentle circles on her cheeks.
I love you, Sarah.
Completely. Desperately. In ways that terrify me. This time, when he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Like all the broken pieces of themselves had finally found their way back together. Sarah melted into his arms, into the warmth and strength and absolute rightness of being held by him. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he said quietly. Good, Sarah replied, her heart full of love and hope and infinite possibility.
I wanted to change everything.
Outside the conference room windows, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. It felt like a promise, like the beginning of something beautiful and true and worth fighting for. Neither of them knew that in his office 3 floors below, Alexander's trusted CFO was making a phone call that would threaten to destroy everything they'd just found. The past threatens the future. Sarah woke up in Alexander's penthouse the next morning to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. She reached for it sleepily, acutely aware of Alexander's arm wrapped around her waist and the warm press of his body against her back. "Sarah Chen," she answered without checking the caller ID. "Well, well. The rumors are true then." Sarah bolted upright, recognizing Marcus's voice immediately. Alexander stirred beside her, instantly alert to the tension in her body.
"What do you want, Marcus?"
"I thought we made it clear yesterday." "Oh, things have changed since yesterday. You see, I had an interesting conversation with Richard Morrison last night."
Alexander CFO.
"Turns out he's been keeping very detailed records of your boss's activities." Sarah felt ice flooding her veins.
"What kind of records?"
"The kind that prove Alexander Kane has been using company resources for personal vendettas. The kind that show he's been trading sexual favors for business advantages. The kind that paint a very clear picture of corruption at the highest levels of Kane Industries." "That's not true, isn't it? You went from junior analyst to executive assistant overnight, right after kissing the CEO.
Very convenient timing, don't you think?"
Alexander sat up, his expression darkening as he caught Sarah's side of the conversation. He reached for the phone, but Sarah shook her head, needing to hear the full extent of Marcus's threat. "The board meets tomorrow morning," Marcus continued. "Morrison's going to present his evidence, demand a full investigation. And when they do, guess whose career gets destroyed along with your boyfriend's?"
"What do you want?"
"The same thing I wanted before."
"Information. Real information this time, not the scraps you've been feeding Blackstone."
"Give me something that will guarantee Alexander's downfall, and I might consider keeping quiet about your little arrangement." The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, her hands shaking with rage and fear. "Morrison," Alexander said quietly. "It wasn't a question. He's been working with Marcus all along. He's the one feeding information to Blackstone." Sarah turned to face him, seeing her own dread reflected in his gray eyes. "Alexander, they have documentation."
"Photos, maybe recordings."
"They're going to make it look like I promoted you in exchange for sexual favors. Everything between us is some kind of sordid business transaction."
Alexander's voice was bitter.
"It's brilliant, actually. Completely destroys both of our reputations at once."
"The board will believe it."
"Some of them have been looking for an excuse to remove me for months. This gives them exactly what they need." Alexander ran his hands through his hair, the vulnerability in his expression breaking Sarah's heart.
"I'm sorry, Sarah."
"I never wanted you to get caught up in this." "Don't." Sarah reached for his hands, gripping them tightly.
"Don't you dare apologize for loving me."
"Don't you dare regret what we have." "How can I not regret it when it's going to destroy you?" "The only thing that would destroy me is losing you." Sarah moved closer, needing him to understand the depth of her commitment. "We'll fight this. Together."
"Sarah, you don't understand."
"When this hits the papers, and it will hit the papers, your reputation will be ruined.
No one will hear you."
"Your career, everything you've worked for."
"I don't care." "You should care."
"You should walk away from this, from me, while you still can."
"Find another job. Start over somewhere else."
"I'll give you references, help you." Sarah silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her love and determination into the contact. When they broke apart, her eyes were fierce with resolve. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "You said yesterday that you love me. Did you mean it?" "Of course I meant it, but—" "Then trust me to make my own choices."
"Trust me to decide what is worth fighting for."
Sarah cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes.
"You are worth fighting for, Alexander Kane."
"What we have is worth fighting for."
"And I be damned if you let a pathetic excuse for a man like Marcus destroy the best thing that has ever happened to me."
Alexander stared at her for a long moment, something like wonder spreading across his features. "How are you real?" he whispered. "How are you mine?" "I'm yours because you're mine," Sarah replied simply. "Now, what are we going to do about Morrison?" The emergency board meeting was called for 9 a.m. sharp. Sarah sat in the outer conference room, ostensibly taking minutes but actually listening to every word through the intercom Alexander had discreetly activated. Her heart pounded as she heard Morrison's smooth voice laying out his case. "Gentlemen, ladies, what I'm about to show you represents a clear pattern of abuse of power and corporate misconduct." Sarah watched through the glass partition as Morrison activated a projector, displaying what looked like financial records on the screen. Alexander Kane has been using company resources to conduct personal vendettas against business rivals. He's hired private investigators, manipulated contracts, and engaged in corporate espionage, all using company funds and company time. Murmurs of concern rippled through the room. Sarah could see Alexander sitting calmly at the head of the table, his expression giving nothing away. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "there's evidence of sexual harassment and quid pro quo arrangements with female employees. Miss Chen's rapid promotion from analyst to executive assistant came immediately after what witnesses describe as intimate contact between her and Mr. Kane."
The murmurs grew louder.
Sarah felt sick, watching as the board members she'd served coffee to just days before now looked at Alexander with suspicion and disgust. "These are serious accusations, Richard," said Eleanor Hartwell, the board's longest-serving member. "Do you have proof?" "I have documentation, photographs, and sworn statements from multiple witnesses." Morrison's smile was triumphant. "I think you'll find the evidence quite compelling." That's when Alexander finally spoke. "Richard," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the chatter like a blade, "before you continue, there's something the board should know." Morrison hesitated, clearly not expecting interruption. "Alexander, I think it's best if you remain silent until—" "The FBI raided your home this morning," Alexander continued as if Morrison hadn't spoken. "They found quite an interesting collection of documents in your safe. Financial records showing payments from Blackstone Corporation. Encrypted communications detailing the sale of confidential company information. Evidence of a conspiracy to commit corporate espionage spanning 18 months. The color drained from Morrison's face.
"That is impossible."
"You can't have." "I can, and I did." Alexander stood slowly, his presence commanding the room. "Did you really think I wouldn't investigate when my own CFO started asking detailed questions about my personal life? When contracts started appearing on competitors' desks before they were finalized? When board members began receiving anonymous tips about supposed misconduct?" Morrison looked trapped, his carefully laid plans crumbling around him.
"You're bluffing."
"Am I?" Alexander pulled out his phone and played an audio recording. Morrison's voice filled the room, clear as day. "The Kane situation is handled. He'll be out by the end of the week, and you'll have a clear path to acquire their client base. The payment should be in my account by Friday." The silence in the room was deafening. Eleanor Hartwell stood up slowly, her face pale with shock. "Richard Morrison," she said formally, "you are hereby terminated from your position as Chief Financial Officer of Kane Industries, effective immediately."
"Security will escort you from the building. You can't do this."
Morrison snarled, his polished facade finally cracking completely. "He's still guilty. He's still sleeping with his assistant. He's still the man who built this company into what it is today," Eleanor interrupted. "While you were selling our secrets to the highest bidder."
"Get out, Richard."
"Before I have you arrested for trespassing as well as embezzlement." Security guards appeared as if by magic, flanking Morrison and escorting him from the room. His eyes found Sarah through the glass partition as he was led away, and the hatred in them made her shiver. "This isn't over," he mouthed silently. But Sarah no longer cared about his threats. Alexander had won. They had won. Together. The board meeting continued for another hour, with Alexander calmly answering questions and providing documentation that proved his innocence. When it was finally over, Eleanor approached Sarah in the outer conference room. "My dear," the older woman said kindly, "I owe you an apology. The things that were said about you today were lies," Sarah said firmly. "All of them."
I believe you.
But I hope you understand the position this puts the company in. There will be rumors, speculation about your relationship with Alexander. Then maybe it's time people knew the truth. Eleanor studied Sarah's face, seeing the determination and strength there. And what is the truth, my dear? The truth is that I love him, Sarah said simply. And he loves me. Everything else is just noise. Alexander appeared in the doorway, his expression softer than Sarah had ever seen it. Eleanor, thank you for your support in there. Don't thank me yet, the older woman replied. Morrison may be gone, but the rumors will persist. The press will have a field day with this story. Are you prepared for that? Alexander looked at Sarah, a question in his eyes. She nodded, her answer clear. We're prepared, he said firmly. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Eleanor smiled, the expression transforming her austere features. In that case, I think you'll weather this storm just fine. You have something Morrison never understood. You have someone worth fighting for. As Eleanor left them alone, Alexander pulled Sarah into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. Once we go public, there's no going back.
No privacy, no anonymity. Everyone will know.
Good, Sarah replied, her voice strong and certain.
I want everyone to know.
I want the whole world to know that I love Alexander Kane, and I'm proud to stand beside him.
Even when the press tears Stati Uniti apart.
Even when they call you a gold digger and me a sexual predator. Even then. Sarah pulled back to look into his eyes. Do you know what Morrison got wrong in his little presentation? What? He tried to make our love look like a business transaction. But what we have isn't something that can be bought or sold or negotiated. What we have is real, and it's beautiful, and it's strong enough to survive whatever they throw at us. Alexander kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they broke apart, his smile was radiant. I love you, Sarah Chen, he said. More than my reputation, more than my company, more than my own life. I love you too, Sarah replied. Now and always. Neither of them saw the photographer outside the conference room window, camera clicking as he captured their embrace. By evening, their picture would be on the front page of every business publication in the city, with headlines screaming about scandal and corruption and abuse of power. But they would face it together. And in the end, that would make all the difference.
Everything falls apart.
The headlines hit the newsstands at 6 a.m., and by 7, Sarah's phone was ringing non-stop. She ignored the calls, focusing instead on the man sleeping peacefully beside her. In the early morning light streaming through his penthouse windows, Alexander looked younger, more vulnerable. She wanted to protect him from what was coming. But there was no protecting either of them from the media storm about to break. Alexander, she whispered, gently shaking his shoulder. You need to see this. He woke instantly, the way he always did, alert and ready for whatever crisis awaited. But when he saw the newspapers spread across his coffee table, even his legendary composure cracked. Power play. CEO's affair with assistant rocks Kane Industries. From analyst to executive. The rise of Sarah Chen.
Millionaire mistress. Inside the Kane Industries scandal.
They got the photo from yesterday, Sarah said quietly, pointing to the front page image of their kiss after the board meeting. Somehow they made it look sordid instead of romantic. Alexander read through the articles in silence, his jaw tightening with each fabricated quote and twisted fact. The stories painted him as a predatory boss who used his position to coerce sexual favors from employees, and Sarah as an ambitious social climber who slept her way to the top. Listen to this, Sarah said, reading from her phone. According to anonymous sources close to the company, Miss Chen used her intimate relationship with Kane to influence major business decisions, including the handling of the recent Blackstone situation. Anonymous sources, Alexander repeated bitterly. Morrison's revenge, delivered from federal custody. The intercom buzzed, and Margaret's voice came through, strained with stress. Mr. Kane. The lobby is full of reporters. They're demanding statements about the relationship, about Miss Chen's promotion, about everything. Alexander looked at Sarah, seeing his own exhaustion reflected in her brown eyes. We need to get you out of here.
Somewhere safe until this dies down. I'm not running.
This isn't about running. It's about protecting you from... Sarah's phone rang, cutting him off. She glanced at the caller ID and sighed.
It's my mother.
She answered the call, putting it on speaker. Her mother's voice filled the room, shrill with panic and embarrassment. Sarah, what is this I'm seeing on the news? They're saying terrible things about you, about some man you work for. Mom, it's not what it looks like. It looks like you've been having an affair with your married boss. He's not married, Mom. And it's not an affair.
We're in love.
The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. When Sarah's mother spoke again, her voice was cold with disappointment.
I raised you better than this, Sarah.
I raised you to have values, to respect yourself. This man has ruined your reputation, destroyed your career, and you're defending him. This man loves me, Sarah said firmly. And I love him.
That is all that matters. Love.
Her mother's laugh was bitter. Love doesn't pay the bills, Sarah.
Love doesn't give you job security.
When this all falls apart, and it will fall apart, you'll be left with nothing. No career, no prospects, no future. The call ended with her mother hanging up in disgust. Sarah stared at the phone, feeling like she'd been slapped. She's scared, Alexander said gently. She's trying to protect you the only way she knows how. By making me feel ashamed of loving you, by making you face reality. Alexander moved to the windows, looking down at the crowd of reporters gathered on the street below. Maybe she's right. Maybe you should walk away from this while you still can. Don't. Sarah's voice was sharp with warning.
Don't you dare start doubting Stati Uniti now.
Before Alexander could respond, Margaret's voice came through the intercom again, more urgent this time. Mr. Kane, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Eleanor Hartwell is on line 1. She says it's urgent. Alexander picked up the phone, his expression growing grimmer with each passing moment. When he hung up, Sarah could see the defeat in his shoulders. Emergency board meeting in an hour, he said quietly. They're voting on my removal as CEO. They can't.
You exposed Morrison. You saved the company.
None of that matters now. The headlines, the scandal, the questions about my judgment, it's too much for them to ignore. Alexander turned to face her, his gray eyes filled with pain. They're also demanding your immediate termination. Sarah felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. On what grounds? Violation of company policy regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates. Creating a hostile work environment. Misuse of company resources.
Alexander's voice was bitter.
They have a legal team working overtime to make sure you can't fight the dismissal. So that's it. They destroy us both and walk away clean. That's how this world works, Sarah. I thought I could protect you from it, but I was wrong. I was wrong about everything. The defeat in his voice broke Sarah's heart. This was exactly what Morrison and Marcus had wanted, to break Alexander's spirit, to make him doubt himself and the love they shared. You weren't wrong, she said fiercely. You weren't wrong about us, about what we have. You weren't wrong to fight for it. Look around, Alexander gestured to the newspapers, to the chaos outside. Look at what loving me has cost you. Your job, your reputation, your family's respect. How can you say I wasn't wrong?
Because I'd rather have one day of real love with you than a lifetime of playing it safe without you.
Sarah moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to meet her eyes.
Yes, this is hard. Yes, it hurts.
But do you regret kissing me in that elevator? Sarah.
Do you regret falling in love with me?
No, but... Do you regret the nights we've spent together, the conversations we've had, the way we've supported each other through everything?
Alexander's resolve cracked.
Of course not. Then don't let them win. Don't let them make you ashamed of the best thing that's ever happened to either of us.
Before Alexander could respond, Margaret's voice came through the intercom one final time. Mr. Kane, the board is ready for you.
Alexander stood slowly, straightening his tie with mechanical precision. He looked like a man walking to his execution. Whatever happens in that meeting, he said quietly, I want you to know that loving you was the best decision I ever made. Even if it costs me everything. Sarah watched through the glass partition as Alexander entered the boardroom for what might be the last time as CEO of Kane Industries. She couldn't hear the proceedings, but she could see the hostile expressions on the board members' faces, could see Eleanor Hartwell looking pained and conflicted. The meeting lasted 3 hours. When it finally ended, Alexander emerged looking older than his years, his shoulders bent with the weight of defeat. "It's over," he said simply. "They voted me out. Effective immediately." Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes. "I'm so sorry. This is all my fault."
No.
Alexander pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "This is not your fault. This is the cost of challenging people like Morrison, of refusing to play by their rules."
What happens now?
Now.
Alexander's smile was bitter.
Now I clean out my office and try to figure out who I am when I'm not the CEO of Kane Industries. They spent the rest of the afternoon packing Alexander's personal belongings, 20 years of his life reduced to a few boxes of mementos and photographs. The office that had been his sanctuary, his command center, his second home, now felt empty and foreign. As they loaded the last box into Alexander's car, Sarah made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "I'm coming with you," she said. "Sarah, you don't have to. I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because I want to. Because wherever you go, whatever you do next, I want to be part of it." Alexander stopped what he was doing and looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the strength and determination in her eyes. "They'll try to destroy you," he warned. "Your reputation, your career prospects, everything. Let them try." Sarah's voice was steady with conviction. "I'd rather be destroyed alongside you than successful without you." As they drove away from Kane Industries for the last time, Sarah felt a strange sense of freedom. Yes, they had lost everything they'd built separately. But they still had each other, and that was worth more than any job title or bank account. Behind them, the reporters were already descending on the building like vultures, ready to pick apart the remains of their former lives. But ahead of them lay something new, something unknown, something they would build together from the ground up. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs.
Fighting for forever.
3 weeks after leaving Kane Industries, Alexander stood in the kitchen of Sarah's small apartment, making coffee and trying to adjust to a life without board meetings, corporate crises, or the weight of running a billion-dollar company. The apartment was tiny compared to his penthouse, but it felt more like home than anywhere he'd lived in years.
Any responses today?
Sarah asked, emerging from the bedroom with her laptop and a stack of rejection letters. 2 more no's from venture capital firms, and one that didn't even bother to respond. Alexander handed her a mug of coffee, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead.
What about you? Some story.
Apparently, being the notorious mistress of a disgraced CEO isn't a selling point on resumes. Sarah's tone was light, but Alexander could see the frustration in her eyes. They'd been living off his savings while trying to start over, but every door seemed to close in their faces. The scandal had followed them everywhere. Potential employers, investors, even landlords had turned them away once they recognized their names. "I'm thinking about changing careers entirely," Sarah said, curling up beside him on the small couch. "Maybe teaching or non-profit work."
Something where my reputation doesn't matter as much.
"You shouldn't have to settle for less because of me." "I'm not settling. I'm adapting." Sarah looked at him seriously. "But what about you? You've been CEO since you were 25. Do you even know what you want to do next?" It was a question that had been haunting Alexander for weeks. His entire identity had been tied up in Kane Industries, in being the ruthless businessman who could conquer any challenge. Without that, he felt lost, unmoored. "I've been thinking about the charity work," Alexander said slowly. "The foundation I started for kids from broken homes."
Maybe that's where he belong now.
Before Sarah could respond, Alexander's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but something made him answer.
Alexander Kane. Mr. Kane, this is Detective Rodriguez with the Financial Crimes Unit.
"I have some news about the Morrison case that I think you'll want to hear." Alexander put the phone on speaker so Sarah could listen.
What kind of news?
"Morrison's been talking. Trying to cut a deal with the prosecutors. He's given us everything. Names, dates, financial records. The conspiracy goes deeper than we initially thought. How deep? Deep enough to bring down half of Blackstone's executive team, including their CEO.
And Mr. Kane.
There's something else. Morrison kept detailed records of his communications with your board members. It seems several of them were in on the plan to remove you from the beginning.
Sarah gripped Alexander's hand tightly.
Which board members? I can't give you names over the phone, but let's just say your removal wasn't as legitimate as they made it appear. We're looking at charges of conspiracy, fraud, and securities manipulation. After the detective hung up, Alexander and Sarah sat in stunned silence. This changes everything, Sarah said finally. Does it? Even if the board members go to jail, even if Morrison's conspiracy is exposed, Kane Industries is still in chaos. The company's reputation is still damaged. But your reputation could be restored. The world could know the truth about what really happened. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, staring out the small window at the city beyond.
What if you don't want it back?
What do you mean? Kane Industries, the CEO position, that life. Alexander turned to face her fully. What if I don't want to go back to being the man I was before? What if I like who I am when I'm with you more than who I was when I had everything? Sarah felt her heart skip.
Alexander.
These past few weeks, living here with you, being just Alexander instead of Alexander Kane, CEO, I've been happier than I've been in years. I wake up next to you, I make coffee, we talk about our dreams instead of quarterly projections.
You remember what it feels like to be human.
But Kane Industries is your life's work. No, Alexander interrupted, pulling her hands into his.
You're my life's work now. Building a future with you, creating something new together.
That matters more to me than any company ever could.
Tears filled Sarah's eyes.
Are you sure? Because once this news breaks, once the truth comes out, you could have everything back.
Your position, your reputation, your power.
I don't want power if it means sacrificing what we have. I don't want a reputation built on fear and intimidation. I want... He paused, searching for the right words. I want to build something with you. Something that matters, something that helps people, something that's ours. Sarah kissed him then, pouring all her love and pride and hope into the contact. When they broke apart, her eyes were bright with tears and possibility. So what do we build? She asked. I don't know yet. But I know we build it together. The next morning brought news that changed everything yet again. Eleanor Hartwell appeared at their door at 8 a.m., looking older and more tired than Sarah had ever seen her. May I come in? She asked quietly. They sat around Sarah's small dining table, the contrast between Eleanor's expensive suit and the modest apartment almost comical. The board met in emergency session last night. Eleanor began without preamble. Detective Rodriguez presented his preliminary findings. 3 board members have been arrested, including our current interim CEO.
Sarah and Alexander exchanged glances.
What does that mean for the company? Alexander asked. It means Kane Industries is in free fall. Stock prices have plummeted, clients are fleeing, employees are resigning in droves. Eleanor's voice was heavy with exhaustion. It means we need you to come back, Alexander. The board is prepared to offer you full reinstatement, a public apology, and complete autonomy to rebuild the company as you see fit. And Sarah? Full reinstatement for her as well, with a promotion to Vice President of Strategic Development. The board recognizes that she was as much a victim of Morrison's conspiracy as you were. It was everything they could have hoped for: vindication, restoration, a chance to reclaim their former lives. But as Sarah looked at Alexander, she saw something unexpected in his expression. Not relief or excitement, but uncertainty. I need time to think about it, he said finally. Eleanor looked surprised. Alexander, this is everything you've worked for. No, it's everything I used to work for.
I'm not sure it's what you want anymore.
After Eleanor left, promising to hold the board's offer open for 24 hours, Sarah and Alexander walked through the city streets in contemplative silence. The autumn air was crisp, the leaves just beginning to turn, and for the first time in months, Sarah felt like they could breathe freely. You're really considering turning it down, she said. It wasn't a question. I keep thinking about what you said that night on the balcony. About whether there was anything left of the person I used to be. Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her. I found him, Sarah. Here with you these past few weeks. I found the man I was before I had to become Alexander Kane, CEO. And I like him better. But Kane Industries will survive with or without me. There are other qualified people who can run it, who can rebuild it. But there's only one you, and only one chance for us to build something together from the ground up. Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes again, but this time they were tears of overwhelming love and pride. What are you saying? I'm saying let's start our own company. Take the charitable foundation and expand it into something bigger. A consulting firm that helps struggling businesses while also supporting community development programs. We'll do well while doing good. That's a huge risk. We'd be starting from nothing, with no guarantee of success. Yes, but we'd be starting together. As equals, as partners, as two people who love each other building something that reflects our values. Alexander took her hands in his gray eyes bright with possibility.
What do you say, Sarah Chen? Want to change the world with me?
Sarah's answer came in the form of a kiss that lasted until they were both breathless and laughing. When they finally broke apart, her smile was radiant. Yes, she said simply. Yes to everything. Yes to the company, yes to the partnership, yes to changing the world together. That afternoon, Alexander called Eleanor Hartwell with his decision. He would not be returning to Kane Industries as CEO, but he would serve as a consultant to help stabilize the company during the transition. Sarah would also provide consulting services, helping to implement new policies and procedures that would prevent future corruption. It was a compromise that allowed them to honor their past while embracing their future. 6 months later, Chen Kane Consulting occupied the top 2 floors of a restored brownstone in the city's emerging business district. The offices were smaller than Kane Industries' corporate tower, but they were filled with something the old building had never possessed: warmth, laughter, and the sense of a team united by common purpose rather than fear. Sarah stood at the window of their shared office, watching Alexander present their latest community development proposal to a group of local business leaders. He looked different now, more relaxed, more genuine, more like the man she'd glimpsed behind the corporate mask. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, appearing beside her as the meeting ended. "Just thinking about how far we've come. 6 months ago, we were unemployed pariahs living in my studio apartment. Now look at us. Any regrets?" Sarah turned to face him fully, seeing the vulnerability in his question. Even now, even after everything they'd built together, part of him still worried that she'd given up too much for love. "Only one," she said seriously.
Alexander's expression fell.
"What?" "I regret that it took a blackout and a case of mistaken identity for us to find each other. Think of all the time we wasted not knowing each other existed." Relief flooded Alexander's features, followed by that devastatingly beautiful smile that never failed to make her heart skip. "Well, when you put it that way." He pulled her into his arms, and Sarah marveled at how perfectly she fit against him, how right this felt even after all these months. "I love you, Alexander Kane," she said, the words as true and powerful as the first time she'd spoken them. "I love you too, Sarah Chen," he replied. "More than Kane Industries, more than any business success, more than my own life." "Good," Sarah said, rising up on her toes to kiss him.
"Because you resta with me forever. Forever sounds perfect."
As they kissed in their shared office, surrounded by the evidence of the life they'd built together from scratch, Sarah thought about the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A power outage, a case of mistaken identity, a single impulsive kiss that had changed everything. Sometimes the best things in life happened by accident. But what they'd built from that accident, the love, the partnership, the shared dreams and common purpose, that was entirely intentional. And it was perfect. The kiss that started forever. 1 year later, Sarah stood in the elevator of their office building, smoothing her dress and trying to calm her racing heart. Alexander had asked her to meet him on the roof, claiming he had a surprise that couldn't wait until they got home. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the top floor, and Sarah stepped out into the cool evening air. The rooftop had been transformed into something magical, twinkling lights strung between potted trees, candles flickering on small tables, and soft music playing from hidden speakers. "Alexander," she called out, looking around in wonder. "I'm here." She turned to find him standing near the edge of the roof, silhouetted against the city skyline. He looked devastatingly handsome in his dark suit, but there was something different about his expression, nervous, almost vulnerable.
"What is all this for?"
Sarah asked as she approached him. "It's an anniversary," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Our anniversary isn't for another 3 months." "Not that anniversary." Alexander smiled, and Sarah could see his hands trembling slightly. "It was exactly 1 year ago today that you kissed me in the elevator."
Sarah se Brett Cott.
She'd been so focused on building their life together that she hadn't realized the significance of the date. "You remembered." "I remember everything about that moment. The way you felt in my arms, the way you tasted, the way my entire world shifted on its axis." Alexander stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "I remember thinking that I was either dreaming or dying, because nothing that perfect could possibly be real." "It was real," Sarah whispered. "It was the most real thing that had ever happened to me. You changed everything for me that day, Sarah. Not just my life, but who I am as a person. You made me remember what it felt like to be human, to be vulnerable, to love someone more than I loved my own carefully constructed walls." Sarah felt tears gathering in her eyes.
"Alexander."
"Let me finish," he said gently. "This past year, building the company with you, creating something meaningful together, it's been the best year of my life. But I want more."
"I want forever."
Alexander released her hands and dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring box that made Sarah's heart stop beating entirely. "Sarah Chen," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you kissed the wrong man in an elevator a year ago, and it turned out to be the most right thing either of us had ever done.
"Will you marry me?"
Sarah stared down at him, at this powerful, brilliant, beautiful man who was offering her his heart and his future with shaking hands and vulnerable eyes. The ring was perfect, a classic solitaire that caught the city lights like captured stars. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course yes." Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger with reverent care, then stood and pulled her into his arms. This kiss was different from all the others, deeper, more profound, full of promises and forever and the weight of a shared future. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying at the same time, Sarah looked around at the romantic setup with new understanding. "You planned all this," she said.
"The lights, the music, the date."
"I've been planning this for months," Alexander admitted.
"I wanted it to be perfect."
"I wanted to give you the proposal you deserve, in a place that's ours." "It is perfect. But you know what would make it even more perfect." "What?" Sarah grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the elevator. "If we celebrated properly."
"In the elevator where it all started."
Alexander laughed, allowing himself to be dragged along. "Sarah Chen, are you suggesting we commemorate our engagement in an elevator?" "I'm suggesting we maintain tradition. Besides," she said, pressing the elevator call button with a mischievous smile, "we have a lot of anniversaries to look forward to. We should start as we mean to go on." The elevator arrived, not the same one from Kane Industries, but close enough, and they stepped inside together. As the doors closed, Alexander pulled Sarah against him, his gray eyes dark with love and desire and infinite happiness. "I love you, future Mrs. Kane," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too, future Mr. Chen Kane," Sarah replied, making him laugh.
"Chen Kane. We're partners in everything, remember? Equal partners."
"Equal partners," Alexander agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like forever. 6 months later, the same elevator carried them up to their wedding reception, held on the roof of their office building. Sarah's dress was simple but elegant, Alexander's suit was perfectly tailored, and both of them were glowing with happiness. The guest list was small: Eleanor Hartwell, who had become something of a surrogate mother to them both; Sarah's mother, who had grudgingly come to approve of Alexander after seeing how he treated her daughter; a handful of close friends and business associates who had supported them through everything. But the most important guests were the kids from Alexander's foundation, ranging in age from 8 to 18, all dressed in their finest clothes and beaming with pride at being included in such an important celebration. "Ladies and gentlemen," Eleanor said, raising her champagne glass for the toast, "I've known Alexander Kane for 15 years, and I can honestly say I've never seen him as happy as he is today. Sarah, you've worked a miracle. You've shown him that love isn't a weakness to be hidden, but a strength to be celebrated." The applause was warm and genuine, but Sarah only had eyes for her new husband. Alexander looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, like he couldn't quite believe she was really his. "Your turn," she whispered as Eleanor finished speaking. Alexander stood, his champagne glass in hand, his voice strong and clear as he addressed their guests. "A year and a half ago, Sarah kissed the wrong man in a dark elevator," he began, earning laughter from the crowd. "It was supposed to be a mistake, an accident, a moment of confusion in a power outage. Instead, it became the beginning of everything good in my life." He turned to face Sarah fully, his gray eyes soft with love. "Sarah, you saw past the reputation, past the walls I'd built around my heart, past all the reasons why loving me was complicated and difficult and potentially dangerous. You chose to love me anyway, and in doing so, you saved me from a life of cold success and warm loneliness." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't care. This was their moment, their celebration, their promise of forever made public and real. "I promise to spend the rest of our lives proving that your faith in me was justified," Alexander continued. "I promise to love you with everything I have, to support your dreams, to build our future together as true equals and devoted partners." He raised his glass higher. "To Sarah, who kissed the wrong man and found her right person. To second chances, to love that conquers all, and to the most beautiful accident that ever happened." The toast was met with applause and cheers, but Sarah and Alexander only heard each other. As the sun set over the city that had brought them together, they danced to their first song as husband and wife, lost in each other and the promise of all their tomorrows. "Any regrets?" Alexander asked as they swayed together, surrounded by love and laughter and the warm glow of string lights. Sarah looked around at their guests, at the life they'd built together, at the foundation they'd created to help other people find their own second chances. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, the scandal, the heartbreak, the moments when it seemed like the world was against them. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "That accidental kiss in the elevator was the best mistake I ever made." "Same here," Alexander replied, spinning her gently. "Here's to beautiful accidents and perfect mistakes." "Here's to forever," Sarah said, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like champagne and happiness and endless possibility. As their guests cheered around them, as the city lights twinkled below them, as their future stretched out before them bright with promise, Sarah thought about the power of a single moment to change everything. One kiss, one accident, one moment of mistaken identity had led to the greatest love story of her life. Sometimes the best things really did happen when you least expected them. And sometimes, the wrong elevator could take you to exactly the right place. Don't forget to rate this story and subscribe if you want more love stories like this one.